Now, folks, we've got VP of Engineering and Data Science, Dr. Nash Borges, ready backstage, and here with me to kick off a shared session is Director of CTU Capabilities, Chris Yule. They're going to explore how integrating threat intelligence into security platforms enhances overall protection. So they'll be looking at how deep analytics and real-world insights can drive superior detection, as well as how all of this ensures that your security investments provide maximum value. So with that, Chris, over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Jules. Yeah, it's great to be here for another annual Threat Intelligence Summit. We've heard a lot today of different topics and viewpoints on the cyber threat that organizations are facing. And obviously making sure that we all broadly understand this and can talk about it is really important. But one thing that we often hear is that it can feel really overwhelming to take TI that's kind of on broadcast mode and turn that into something actionable. And that's something that we're very focused on at Secureworks. So yes, we want to talk about TI and write about it, but how do we turn that into something actionable? Well, the good news is that we are very focused on that. Within the CTU, we're making sure that we're collecting as much raw data as possible, that we're turning that into knowledge. But crucially, we really have two outputs. So we have threat intelligence products, whether that's TI reports in the platform, presentations like you're seeing today, but also detections is one of the key outputs that we have. So making sure that we're turning that knowledge into detections in any way that we can. So what mechanisms do we have to turn knowledge into detections within the platform? Really, there's kind of four high-level things that we have. We have indicators like domain names and IP addresses. We have event-based detectors, so signatures or filters that we can apply to network traffic, endpoint telemetry, any files that we see, infrastructure logs, cloud logs, things like that. When we see something that we know is malicious or unusual, we can write signatures that detect that within the platform. We then also have tactic graphs and advanced detectors. So tactic graphs take chains of events or chains of alerts. So if we see an endpoint alert followed by a specific file alert, that maybe we know that's indicative of something more meaningful, and we can raise a tactic graph alert that gives you more confidence in that alert. And then we have advanced detectors, so engineering-based detectors that are using AI and machine learning to really look across all of the telemetry and find those kind of needle in the haystacks that are better to use with machines than with humans. And obviously, we spoke a lot about AI earlier. One thing that we get asked frequently is how do we use AI within detections? The good thing is we've been using AI within our detections for a number of years. We try and use the right tool for the right job, and that's a phrase that I've heard Nash use in the past. And we try and use AI where we can, but we also still have a team of experts in the CTU using human intelligence to iteratively improve our existing base of detectors. So we already have thousands of detectors, and we want to make sure that we're learning the key new things that we can from our incident response engagements, from our partners, and we're turning those into new detectors to keep improving our detection space. If we look at the four types of things that I said that we can use to detect things within Taegis, some of those are human-driven, some of those are automated and using AI, and some of those are a mix. So you can see with our indicator feed, we try and automate that as much as possible. So we have large numbers of indicators that we try and filter down to the high fidelity ones. But we also have human-driven, research-driven indicators that we apply to the platform when we think that they're beneficial to detections. Our event-based detectors, so the endpoint telemetry, the network signatures, most of that is driven by humans. So we've learned something interesting. We want to write a new signature that we can apply to the platform to detect something new. Our tactic graphs are also primarily human-driven, but we are starting to explore how we can use machine learning to find interesting patterns of things, particularly within malware detonations and incident response engagements, to see if we can train data to identify tactic graphs that could provide high-fidelity detections at an automated level. And then the advanced detectors, and that's why there's two of us here today. So I own the CTU capabilities, the technical platforms within the CTU that are used to research and identify new countermeasures, new detections, and also tune the existing detections that we have. And Nash owns all of Taegis engineering, and within that includes the research and the AI-based detectors that we build with input from our threat intelligence. So now that we've gone through the different mechanisms that we have to detect things, I'm going to walk through an example of where we use humans to really learn from the information that we get from our telemetry and from our incident response engagements and turn that into a new type of detector. So this case study started over the summer where we got a flurry of alerts from our business email compromise detector. So this is a detector that we already have in place. It's designed to look for a number of different indicators of business email compromise, so things like mail forwarding rules being created, unusual logins to mail applications, things like that. This is one example of a business email compromise detector detection. In this case, it was a mail forwarding rule being created within Office 365, which can often be an indication of a malicious actor trying to redirect emails outside of the environment. In these cases, what was interesting about this was that we got a flurry of escalations to our unlimited response service. So these were unusual BEC attacks because the users were apparently protected by multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is one of the key recommendations we make to protect against things like BEC. But in these cases, the victims had successfully set up MFA, but the threat actor was still able to get in somehow. So we were able to take a look at these and try and learn from that. So how were the threat actors getting in? And what we found was quite interesting. So this is one of the investigations that we had of a possible business email compromise attack. And as you can see in the findings, it said a malicious actor gained access to the account from a specific IP address. Prior to the successful authentication, a series of logins were observed with the Axios user agent. So what this seemed to suggest was that the attacker was using Axios, which is kind of a tool that you can use to man-in-the-middle traffic, to basically man-in-the-middle attack. So they could send authentication requests to the real victim, they would approve that, and then the attacker could then use that session to gain access to the mailbox and create the mail forwarding rules that we'd initially observed. So this was how they were getting past the multi-factor authentication, by bypassing the authentication traffic, or man-in-the-middling the authentication traffic. So as I said, we're focused then on two outputs. We've learned something new. How do we inform customers? So of course, we published a CTU tips. This is one of our threat intelligence reports that's available on the platform that described this activity that we'd seen and why it was unusual. And you can see that in the platform if you search for Axios client abuse for persistent access. But this also allowed us to detect new things. So we were able to create a new detector looking for this suspicious user agent that may be indicative of an MFA bypass attack. This is the countermeasure within one of our internal systems. You can see the description of the detector that we've created, and you can also see the spark line over the last 30 days of how often we've detected this within our customers. So from last week, in the last 30 days, this new alert has alerted customers 315 times with 114 alerts on one specific day. So that shows you that as we're creating these new alerts, that then creates brand new alerts that we can then use to feed into other things. This is one of the examples of the suspicious Axios alerts that you may have seen. And then what our job is then to use that to feed into the existing detectors that we have and make sure that we're constantly learning, constantly adapting our detectors to learn these new things so that we're constantly staying on top of the threat and able to alert on the things that matter most today. And that's the case study from how we use humans to improve our detections. I'm now going to pass over to Nash to talk about an example of how we use AI to improve those in a different way. Nash.
Thanks, Chris. So I'm going to talk about one of our AI-based detectors that we refer to as our hands-on keyboard detector. So if you rewind the clock back to the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, there was, of course, the SolarWinds story in the news. And most of that was about a Russian state actor that we refer to as Nobelium, or Iron Ritual. And that state actor had conducted a very complex supply chain exploit, got in the middle of that CI/CD process for that piece of software in order to execute their breach. But if you're paying very close attention, there is a secondary state actor that we refer to as Bronze Spiral, who was going after the same piece of software, but using a more traditional zero-day authentication bypass vulnerability. And as a data scientist, when you're looking at this information, or a security researcher, it kind of jumps off the page at you as something that's probably malicious. You see them dumping the contents of directories to a file called license.txt. You see them looking around for domain admin credentials. You see them asking, "Who am I?" to establish what privileges they already have when they get access to this box. And then you also see them dumping the contents of LSASS to disk. That isn't in of itself something that's kind of a dead giveaway that this is probably malicious activity. The other thing that's interesting to note is the timing information. So this actually occurred on the US Thanksgiving holiday. And it's a well-known tactic for some threat actors to exploit holidays and long weekends when they think security operations centers will be less highly staffed. When you start looking at this information about the timing, the other thing to notice is how relatively slow it actually occurs when there's a human on the keyboard, and that's what we want to focus on. When it comes to the content, we see similar commands being used for everyday system administration, but it's actually the timing information that can be used to distinguish that. So when it comes to system administrators, they're often running these types of commands in scripts that run very quickly, and they might be gathering information for troubleshooting purposes, for third-party agents collecting telemetry, and a wide variety of benign use cases. But when a malicious threat actor actually has their hands on the keyboard, that's the activity that we want to focus on. When you start to combine this information with the content in what we're calling weak signature counts on the x-axis, you can start to see that it's even easier to pull away the malicious activity in red from the blue benign activity. And these signatures aren't by themselves powerful enough to distinguish malicious from benign activity, but when you see a lot of them happening in a short time period, it starts to increase the probability that this is actually malicious activity. What we ended up using in this case, as Chris was mentioning, the right tool for the right job, is what's called ensemble machine learning. So in this case, we're training a number of different algorithms, we're partitioning the data a number of different ways randomly, and we're training a bunch of different models to try to identify this malicious activity, and using the wisdom of the AI crowds to produce very high fidelity alerts that can identify the activity that's actually malicious from the benign activity that we don't care about. And we're able to do this at a precision over 99% while keeping the false alarm rate below 1 in 150 million in terms of these username, machine name, hour-long buckets of activity. So we're able to find this activity that's actually malicious without using, a single signature, and differentiate it from a bunch of benign activity that system administration utilities are using every day. And this is just one example where we're using artificial intelligence and machine learning to do detections, to take raw telemetry and find malicious activity. Another area that we use machine learning and artificial intelligence is to triage alerts. So whenever you're dealing with alerts coming from a wide variety of different systems, those vary quite a bit in terms of their signal-to-noise ratio. And we use machine learning to learn from our human expert analysts in terms of what they actually care about, what they're investigating on an hourly basis, and give them more of the things that they're interested in. That comes to learning information about the producer of a given alert, but it also incorporates information about the entities that are in an alert, because analysts tend to focus on either victims or threat actors, and we want to be able to give them more information that they might be investigating at any given hour. Another reason to use artificial intelligence, in particular large language models that have obviously become very popular over the last year or two, is to take very complex machine code and turn it into something that's very easy for even junior analysts to understand. So we're explaining complex command line strings, PowerShell scripts, third-party alerts, even some of our own detection logic, and converting that into English text that's very easy to understand. And then, of course, the latest use case of artificial intelligence is to automate the end-to-end response workflow to make sure that we're keeping our customers safe as quickly as possible. So threat intelligence is best used when it's automated and incorporated into your security pipelines. Detection effectiveness is something that we gain a wide variety of from both human experts as well as artificial intelligence. And at Secureworks, the way that we tend to utilize automation and artificial intelligence is to speed up the processing of things that we understand very well and we've seen before many times, and use human experts to focus on the emerging threats and the tactics, techniques, and procedures that we haven't seen before. So that's all we have today. Bring back Jules.
Not quite, because I want to pick your brain, but thank you so much, Nash, and thank you, Chris, for your shared insight there. I'd love to gain a bit more insight into how that collaboration works. So, Nash, as a data scientist and from a data science perspective, is there an aspect of the intelligence that Chris's team in the CTU feeds you that you see the most value in?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that actionable intelligence about threat actors and the things that we're having a hard time detecting when it comes to using simple signatures. Those are the best use cases for artificial intelligence.
Okay, that's very succinct and tangible to take away, thank you. And then Chris, are there differences, now that we've looked at both these perspectives, in how you'd respond to a human-driven detection versus an AI-driven detection?
Yeah, I think all alerts are not created equal, so any alert that you get, you have to apply some kind of filter of what does this mean to me, how much do I trust what it's saying. So a simple detection like an indicator, you've got a machine communicating with a malware command and control server, very easy to do, go investigate that. Something like the hands-on keyboard detector, it's looking at a broad variety of telemetry and making an assessment as to whether that might be malicious. So it definitely takes a bit more investigation, a bit more effort to understand what it's saying and if that truly is malicious. So yeah, you definitely need to apply that filter depending on what alert it is.
Well, it was excellent to get your shared expertise in this session. Thank you both so much. Thank you. That there was Secureworks VP of Engineering and Data Science, Nash Borges, and Director of CTU Capabilities, Chris Yule. And we're leaping from shining a light on best practices, as these gents did so well, to exploring a much foggier world of unknowns in our next session of Dark Web Insights. You don't want to miss it.